Now, I have a question for you. Of all the problems that you think the Democratic Party is facing, do you think one of them is that the party is too democratic? Do you think one of the problems with the Democratic Party is that the voters have too much of a say in how the party is governed? Well, I'll tell you this. There are two political scientists who do believe that. They believe that the Democratic Party has gone haywire with its insistence on reforming itself through the Unity Reform Commission that published its findings last week. They were good findings, not ideal perhaps, but certainly a great improvement over the status quo. They included eliminating 60% of the superdelegates, which I would say gets us 60% of the way to where we want to be, and some other reforms as well in terms of financial transparency and so on. It's a start. Let's put it this way. It's a real start. And yet there were two political scientists who thought this was a bad thing. Now, I will warn you in advance that I disagreed with these two political scientists, not just because of their beliefs, but because I think they are guilty of bad political science work. So it becomes something of a political science beef at this point. My posse versus their posse, but here goes nothing. I think their science, their argument is, first of all, it's an interesting idea, right? Could a party be too democratic? Worth kind of playing around with, but their argument is morally wrong, weak on the merits, and it's bad analysis. That is, to the extent that you can make sense out of what they're saying. They wrote an op-ed in the New York Times entitled, "Is the Democratic Party Becoming Too Democratic?" The authors are Julia Azari and Seth Maskett. They may be wonderful people. They may even be great political scientists. But if so, this was not their finest moment. They said of the Unity Reform Commission, quote, "These recommendations illustrate the types of reforms we often see connected to democracy within parties, but these reforms are actually difficult to define and implement across many states." Now, they said that about reducing superdelegates by 60%, but it's not hard to define. They just said it themselves in half a sentence. Cut back the number of so-called superdelegates by 60%. Not hard to define. Is it hard to implement? No. You just get rid of 60% of the superdelegates. In fact, they've already said which ones will remain. It's not complicated. They've said that elected members, and I think there was one other category, will remain, but the people who are kind of legacy, like former elected officials and so on, will go. Done. Okay, so it's not hard to define or implement. So what are they really talking about? What's their real complaint here? They say that parties have become more democratically run over time, and when that happens, people have more faith in the resulting decisions. So candidate nominations, for example, are considered more legitimate. Okay, what's the problem? Well, they have a problem. They say that it's not very realistic to ask voters to pick good nominees. What do they mean by realistic? I'll get back to that in a second. They say that party leaders will always have vastly more information about candidates, their strengths and flaws, their ability to govern and work with Congress, their backing among various interest groups and coalitions than voters and caucus goers do. That information is useful, they say, even vital to picking a good nominee. Now, okay, then they don't really mean it's not realistic. You can do it. They mean it's not a good idea. So why didn't they say that? Why did they pick a word like realistic? And where have we heard that word before? Oh, I know. It's when everybody was telling Bernie Sanders supporters that it wasn't realistic to expect Bernie Sanders to win the 2016 election, even though he consistently performed 6 to 8 points better than Hillary Clinton in polls, a margin that would have ensured the Democrats won in 2016 instead of Donald Trump. But they kept saying culturally, for some cultural reason, it's not realistic. Now, what about their substantive idea that party leaders can pick better candidates than voters can? Well, party leaders have always given the advantage to their preferred candidates. They basically called the shots for the last 10 or 20 years, especially lower down on the ballot. As a result, Democrats have lost 2/3 of governorships, 2/3 of state houses, They have lost both houses of Congress. They have lost the presidency, and things do not appear to be changing soon. I would say this is a very, very good time to ignore this kind of thinking and instead demand that the Democratic Party continue to become more democratic. It's in the name. Now let's bake it into the party.